She had spent years controlling everything, until one mistake controlled her. A flight attendant, used to making the rules, slaps a mother holding a baby. Without realizing the man who owns the airline is watching. What happens next? Let's just say no one expected the ending she got. Stay till the end, because once the truth comes out, there's no turning back. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. She thought she had everything under control. Vanessa Holt walked through the airport with confidence, her uniform crisp, her posture straight. Every step she took made it clear she was in charge. She had worked for years to get here, to climb the ranks, and now she ruled the first-class cabin like it was her own kingdom. Passengers were just names on a manifest, and if they didn't fit the image of what she thought belonged in first class, she had no problem letting them know. She believed in rules, in order, and most of all, in her own authority. But today, one mistake would change everything. One moment of impatience, one act of arrogance, would take away everything she had worked for. And the worst part, she never saw it coming. The boarding process had started smoothly, just like any other flight. First-class passengers arrived early, taking their seats, sipping their welcome drinks, and settling in for a comfortable flight. The sound of luggage rolling down the aisle mixed with quiet conversations and the soft chime of announcements. Vanessa watched the passengers closely, giving polite but controlled smiles. Most of them were businessmen, wealthy travelers, and regular flyers who knew the routine. Then she saw her. Olivia Carter stepped onto the plane, holding a baby in her arms, shifting a small bag on her shoulder. Vanessa's eyes immediately narrowed. A baby in first class. She hated when that happened. First class was supposed to be peaceful, quiet, exclusive. The last thing it needed was a crying baby disturbing the other passengers. She forced a smile as Olivia approached. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Her voice was polite, but there was a sharpness underneath. She hoped Olivia would get the hint. Olivia gave a tired smile, adjusting the baby in her arms. "I'm fine, thank you." She reached into her bag and handed over her ticket. Vanessa barely glanced at it before speaking. "First class is for passengers looking for a relaxing experience. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in economy?" She tilted her head slightly, expecting Olivia to step back, to move quietly and avoid trouble. Olivia blinked, confused for a moment, then frowned. "I have a first-class ticket." There was something about the way she said it that irritated Vanessa. Too sure, too firm, as if she actually belonged here. Vanessa glanced at the ticket again, reading the name, then the seat number. It was correct, but she still didn't like it. She handed the ticket back with a tight smile. "Just making sure." Olivia nodded, shifting her baby again and stepping past her toward her seat. As she moved through the aisle, some passengers glanced at her, some curious, some already annoyed at the sight of an infant in first class. She ignored them, focusing on settling in, placing her bag under the seat, adjusting a small blanket over her baby's back. Vanessa watched from a distance, feeling a slow irritation grow in her chest. The baby was quiet now, but she knew how these flights went. It would start with small noises, then crying, then complaints from other passengers. She had seen it before. She had dealt with it before, and she didn't intend to let it happen again. She had a way of handling things, and today would be no different. What she didn't know was that this time, her way of handling things would cost her everything. Vanessa kept her eyes on Olivia, her annoyance simmering just beneath the surface. She watched as Olivia settled into her seat, adjusting the baby against her chest, trying her best to keep the little one calm. The mother looked exhausted, her movements slow, careful, as if she was bracing herself for judgment. Vanessa had seen it before. Parents with young children, always on edge, worried about disturbing the other passengers. But in Vanessa's mind, first class wasn't a place for crying babies or tired mothers. It was a place for business travelers, executives, and people who understood the importance of a quiet flight. She took a deep breath and forced a pleasant smile as she walked through the aisle, greeting other passengers, offering drinks, making sure everything was in order. But every few moments, her gaze flickered back to Olivia. She was waiting for a reason, any reason to prove that this woman shouldn't be here. It didn't take long. The baby let out a soft whimper, barely loud enough to be heard over the low chatter of first-class passengers. Olivia quickly rocked him, whispering something soothing, but the tiny sound was all Vanessa needed. She turned sharply and made her way back to Olivia's seat, her heels clicking against the carpet. She stopped beside her, lowering her voice just enough to make it clear she didn't want anyone else to hear. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to keep your child quiet. Other passengers have paid for a peaceful experience," she said, her tone polite but firm. Olivia looked up, startled. "I know, I'm trying. He's just a little restless, but I'll keep him calm." Vanessa nodded stiffly but didn't move. "I understand, but if he continues to make noise, I may have to ask you to move to a different seat." Olivia's brows furrowed. "A different seat? I paid for this one." Vanessa sighed, shifting her weight. "I understand, ma'am, but first class is a space for passengers looking for an uninterrupted flight. I'm just saying that if he becomes a distraction, I may need to make adjustments." A few passengers had started glancing over, sensing the tension. Olivia held Vanessa's gaze, her grip tightening around the baby. "I'll keep him calm," she said again, her voice quieter this time. Vanessa hesitated, then gave a tight nod before walking away. But she wasn't done. She knew the baby would cry again, and when he did, she'd be ready. She busied herself with small tasks, handing out drinks, checking on passengers, but she kept her ears sharp, waiting for another sound. The moment it happened, a small, tired cry from the baby. She spun back toward Olivia. This time she didn't bother lowering her voice. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to control your child." A murmur rippled through the first-class cabin. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others glanced at each other, sensing an argument brewing. Olivia looked up, frustration flashing across her face. "I am trying," she said, her voice tight. "He's just a baby." Vanessa crossed her arms. Then maybe first class wasn't the best choice. The air around them grew thick with silence. Olivia stared at Vanessa, her jaw tightening, her exhaustion now mixed with something else. Anger. Before Olivia could respond, a voice spoke up from the row behind her. "She has a first-class ticket. Leave her alone." Vanessa's head snapped toward the source of the voice. An older man dressed in a navy suit was watching the exchange with mild irritation. A few other passengers were now paying full attention, their expressions varying from discomfort to quiet disapproval. Vanessa straightened, forcing a smile. "I'm simply ensuring that everyone enjoys their flight, sir." The man didn't look convinced. "Doesn't seem like you're ensuring much of anything except harassing a mother and her child." More whispers spread through the cabin. Vanessa felt heat rise to her face. This wasn't how she expected things to go. She needed to regain control of the situation, and fast. Turning back to Olivia, she forced the finality into her voice. "Ma'am, if your baby continues to be disruptive, I will have to move you." Olivia stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then without a word, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and typed a short message. She pressed send. Vanessa had no idea what she had just set in motion. Vanessa watched as Olivia slipped her phone back into her bag. The movement was quick, almost dismissive, and it irritated her. She expected an argument, some sort of resistance, but instead, the woman had just texted someone? Vanessa frowned. Maybe she was complaining to a friend, or maybe she was just venting, but it didn't matter. Olivia would learn soon enough that texting wasn't going to change anything. Vanessa was in charge here, and she had made her position clear. She turned sharply, walking toward the front of the cabin, her heels clicking against the carpet. She expected this to be the end of it. Olivia would either keep her baby quiet or get moved to economy. Either way, Vanessa had handled the problem, or so she thought. A few minutes later, as she was handing a glass of champagne to a businessman in the front row, she noticed something. The captain had stepped out of the cockpit, which was unusual mid-flight. Even more unusual, he was speaking quietly with another flight attendant near the galley, his brows furrowed as if something serious had just happened. Vanessa's stomach tensed slightly, but she quickly dismissed it. It had nothing to do with her. She returned to her routine, refilling drinks, checking seatbelts, making sure everything was running smoothly. But then, as she turned back down the aisle, she noticed another detail. One of the first-class passengers had his phone out, reading something with wide eyes. He nudged the man next to him, whispering something. Then another passenger pulled out their phone, their brows raising as they scrolled through a message. Something was happening. Vanessa's frown deepened. She walked past them, pretending not to notice, but she could feel it. A shift in the air, a quiet buzz of anticipation, as if people knew something she didn't. Then the intercom crackled. The captain's voice came through, calm, steady, but carrying an edge of authority that immediately grabbed everyone's attention. "Vanessa Holt, please report to the cockpit immediately." Vanessa's breath caught for a second. A few passengers turned their heads toward her, some exchanging glances. Even Olivia, still seated with her baby in her arms, looked up, watching. Vanessa forced a polite smile and nodded toward a flight attendant near the galley. "Cover the cabin," she said smoothly before heading toward the front. As she walked past the first-class passengers, she could feel their eyes on her. The ones who had been reading something on their phones seemed especially interested. That bothered her. She hated being out of the loop, and whatever was going on, she had a growing feeling it had something to do with that text Olivia had sent. When she reached the cockpit door, she knocked once before stepping inside. The moment she did, she felt the tension in the air. The captain, a man known for his strict professionalism, stood with his arms crossed. The flight supervisor was already waiting, standing near the radio controls with a grim expression. Vanessa's stomach twisted slightly. She had never been called into the cockpit like this before. The captain wasted no time. "Vanessa," he said, his voice steady, "do you know who's on board this flight?" Vanessa blinked. "Of course, sir. First-class passengers were checked during boarding." The captain exchanged a glance with the supervisor before looking back at her. "And did you happen to notice who you were speaking to back there?" Vanessa frowned, suddenly feeling defensive. "A mother who was disturbing the first-class cabin. I was simply enforcing policy." "You put your hands on her?" the supervisor interrupted, his voice sharp. Vanessa's stomach dropped. "No," she said quickly. "I only warned her about keeping the baby quiet. That's all." The captain sighed heavily, rubbing his temple. Then he reached for the radio controls, pressed a button, and a familiar voice crackled through the speaker. A deep, calm voice. A voice that sent a chill down Vanessa's spine. "This is James Carter. Would you like to explain to me why you just threatened to remove my wife from first class?" Vanessa's blood turned ice cold. James Carter, the CEO, the owner of the airline, the man who had the power to fire her with a single phone call. And Olivia, she wasn't just some random passenger, she was his wife. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. The radio crackled again, but James Carter didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. His words hung in the air like a sharp blade, slicing through whatever confidence she had left. She felt her pulse pounding in her ears. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She had spoken to hundreds of passengers before, enforced rules on every flight. But this was different. The captain exhaled slowly, watching her reaction. "I'll ask again," he said, his voice lower this time. "Do you understand what you just did?" Vanessa forced herself to swallow. I didn't know who she was," she finally managed to say. The supervisor let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "So it's only a problem because of who she is?" His expression darkened. "Not because you treated a paying first-class passenger like she didn't belong?" Vanessa's hands clenched at her sides. She didn't like where this was going. She needed to fix this. Fast. "I was only following policy," she said quickly. "Babies in first class can disturb other passengers. I was trying to maintain the experience for everyone else." The captain's jaw tightened. "You accused a woman with a valid first-class ticket of not belonging. You humiliated her, and now you're standing here trying to justify it?" Vanessa's breath came faster. "I wasn't trying to humiliate her, The radio clicked again, and James Carter's voice cut through the cabin. "Stop talking." Vanessa shut her mouth instantly. The silence that followed was suffocating. James's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now, a dangerous kind of quiet. "Captain, I want her removed from duty immediately." Vanessa's body went rigid. Wait, what? The captain didn't even look surprised. He simply nodded once, glancing toward the supervisor. You're relieved, the supervisor said flatly. For the remainder of this flight, you will sit in the crew jump seat. You will not interact with passengers, and when we land, you will report directly to an administrative review. Vanessa felt the ground beneath her shift. You can't be serious, she whispered. The captain's eyes locked onto hers. Dead serious. Panic bubbled in her chest. This wasn't a simple warning. This wasn't a minor complaint. This was career-ending. She had worked years to get here. She had followed every rule, climbed the ranks, made sure she was respected. She wasn't about to be removed like some incompetent rookie. She took a shaky step forward, lowering her voice. Captain, please, she said, forcing calm into her tone. I understand now. I'll apologize. You don't understand anything, the supervisor interrupted. And the fact that you still think you can talk your way out of this proves it. The radio crackled again, and James Carter spoke one last time. Vanessa Holt will not be working another flight for this airline. Ever. The weight of those words hit her harder than anything else. She felt her stomach twist violently, her knees weak. The captain pressed the intercom, his voice calm but firm. Understood, sir. Vanessa's hands shook. Wait, she whispered. No one responded. The supervisor simply gestured toward the cockpit door. You need to leave. Now. For the first time in her career, Vanessa had no power, and she had nowhere to run. Vanessa's feet felt glued to the floor. Her entire body tensed as reality crashed down on her. The cockpit, a place she had always associated with control and authority, now felt suffocating. She wanted to argue, to fight back, but for the first time in her career, she realized that no one here was going to listen. The captain kept his gaze on her, waiting. The supervisor's arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. The radio remained silent, but Vanessa could still feel James Carter's presence, like a shadow over everything. She swallowed hard. This is a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now. I wasn't trying to be rude, Her words trailed off when she saw the captain's expression harden. Leave, he said simply. There was no room for argument. Vanessa forced her legs to move, stepping back toward the door. She turned the handle with trembling fingers and pushed it open. The moment she stepped out of the cockpit, the whispers began. Passengers were already watching. Some tried to pretend they weren't listening, their gazes flickering toward their phones or out the window. Others made no effort to hide their interest. Their eyes locked onto her as she walked past. A few even exchanged looks, as if silently confirming what they had just heard. Vanessa's heart pounded. She had walked through this aisle 1,000 times before, always with confidence, always in control. Now every step felt like a public humiliation. She kept her head up, trying to ignore the stares, trying to ignore the burning sensation in her face. But then, as she neared the first-class section, she heard it. A voice, soft, calm, and deliberate. Do you still think I don't belong here? Vanessa froze. Olivia was watching her. She sat comfortably in her seat, her baby resting against her chest, her fingers gently adjusting the blanket. Her expression wasn't smug, wasn't mocking, it was patient. Like she was waiting for an answer Vanessa didn't know how to give. For a brief moment, Vanessa thought about responding, thought about offering some excuse, some defense. But what could she say? She had been so sure, so confident that Olivia didn't belong in first class, that she was just another passenger causing problems, another person she could control. And now Vanessa was the one being removed. Her throat tightened. Without another word, she turned and walked past Olivia, her footsteps heavy as she made her way to the back of the plane. The whispers followed her. Passengers didn't even try to hide their conversations now. She's done. She got fired mid-flight? I can't believe she thought she could get away with that. Vanessa clenched her jaw, her hands curling into fists. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. But as she reached the crew jump seat and sank into it, she knew the truth. James Carter had made his decision, and there was no coming back from it. Vanessa sat stiffly in the crew jump seat, her back pressed against the wall, hands curled into fists on her lap. She felt every vibration of the plane, every murmur from the passengers behind her. The soft hum of the engines should have been background noise, but all she could hear was her own pulse pounding in her ears. She had never sat here before. Not like this. This seat was meant for trainees, for assistants, people who had no authority, people who took orders. And now she was one of them. A younger flight attendant, Mia, hesitated near the galley, her eyes flickering toward Vanessa. She looked nervous, unsure whether she should say something. Eventually she spoke, her voice careful. "Are you okay?" Vanessa snapped her head up. "Do I look okay?" she hissed. Mia flinched slightly but didn't step away. I didn't think it would be this serious," she admitted. "I mean, getting removed from duty mid-flight?" "Shut up," Vanessa muttered. Mia pressed her lips together, then sighed. "Look, I don't think you get how bad this is," Vanessa scoffed. "Oh, I get it," she shot back. "I get that a baby was making noise in first class. I get that I tried to enforce a policy that every other flight attendant here is too scared to enforce. I get that now, because she's married to him, I'm suddenly the villain." Mia watched her for a long moment before shaking her head. "No, Vanessa, you don't get it." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "You didn't lose your job because of a crying baby," Mia continued. "You lost it because you assumed that woman didn't belong. You didn't even check who she was before trying to push her out." Vanessa's hands gripped the edges of her seat. "Passengers complain about babies all the time." "Yeah," Mia agreed, "but they don't slap the people holding them." Vanessa froze. Mia let out a breath. "People saw, Vanessa, the way you grabbed her arm, the way you spoke to her. If it wasn't for the slap, maybe you'd still have a chance to talk your way out of this. But now," she shook her head, "it's over." Vanessa's mind raced. The slap. She hadn't even thought about it in the moment. It had happened so fast. A split-second reaction. Olivia had been ignoring her, brushing her off like she didn't matter, and Vanessa had acted. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just a warning, just a way to show Olivia that she was in charge. But now it was the reason she had lost everything. Her throat felt dry. "She could have just let it go," Vanessa muttered. Mia's expression turned cold. "She did let it go," she said. "She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't call for security. She didn't demand anything." She gestured toward first class. "All she did was send one text." Vanessa clenched her fists. Mia gave her a look of pity before stepping away, leaving Vanessa alone with her thoughts. She had spent years making sure she was the one in control. She had spent years making sure passengers followed her rules. But now she was the one sitting in the back, powerless. And the worst part? This was just the beginning of what James Carter had planned for her. The plane continued cruising, but Vanessa barely noticed. Her body sat frozen in the jump seat, her mind racing through every possible way to fix this. But no matter how she spun it, there was no way out. James Carter had made up his mind. Still, there had to be something she could do. Her fingers twitched as she reached for her phone, heart hammering. Maybe if she sent an email to HR before they landed, she could get ahead of this. Maybe she could claim a misunderstanding, twist the narrative before it was too late. But the moment she unlocked her phone, her stomach dropped. Her work email had already been disabled. Her employee login, gone. A fresh wave of panic spread through her chest. This was happening faster than she had expected. James Carter wasn't just removing her from duty, he was wiping her out completely. She clenched her jaw and turned her head slightly, scanning the first-class cabin from the corner of her eye. Olivia sat calmly, rocking her baby gently, completely unbothered. A few first-class passengers were still whispering, their eyes flickering toward her every now and then. They knew. They all knew. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just about losing her job. This was about the way she was losing it. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't a simple termination email waiting for her at headquarters. It was public, a humiliation playing out in real time, in front of every passenger, every crew member. Her hands curled into fists as she thought about Olivia again. She had barely reacted when Vanessa grabbed her arm. She hadn't yelled or demanded Vanessa be removed. She had simply taken out her phone and sent that text. And that was what terrified Vanessa the most. Because if Olivia had made a scene, if she had argued, Vanessa might have been able to turn it around. She could have played it off, claimed the mother was being aggressive, uncooperative, but Olivia didn't give her that chance. Instead, she let James Carter handle it, and he did immediately. Vanessa's pulse quickened. This wasn't just an angry husband protecting his wife. This was power. The kind of power that didn't need to yell, the kind that didn't give warnings, the kind that simply erased people. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to sit still. The flight wasn't even over yet. There was still time. Maybe if she spoke to the captain again, begged for another chance, she could salvage this. Maybe James Carter could be convinced to change his mind. But deep down, she already knew the truth. There was no fixing this. This wasn't just about today's flight. James Carter was about to make sure she never worked in the airline industry again. Vanessa gripped the armrests of the crew jump seat, her knuckles turning white. The realization that this wasn't just a simple suspension, but a complete erasure was settling in like a heavy weight on her chest. She forced herself to breathe evenly, trying to regain some control, but it was slipping further away with every passing second. She had always been the one issuing orders, making the decisions, controlling the outcome. Now she was just waiting for the plane to land, waiting for her fate to be sealed. The whispers in first class hadn't stopped. She could feel them watching her, their stares cutting into her like knives. Some passengers spoke in hushed voices, probably speculating about what would happen next. Others stole quick glances in her direction, pretending to be looking at something else. And Olivia, she hadn't looked at Vanessa once since their last exchange. She sat in her seat, calmly rocking her baby, her face relaxed, almost serene, as if none of this had ever been a problem to her, as if she had known from the beginning how this was going to end. Vanessa felt something hot rise in her throat. She wasn't used to this feeling, powerlessness. She straightened her back, refusing to shrink into herself. This couldn't be the end. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let it all disappear over one mistake. Maybe she still had a way out. Her eyes flicked toward the galley where Mia was organizing drink trays. She had to try. Even if it was desperate, even if it was a long shot, she had to do something. She took a deep breath and waved Mia over. The younger flight attendant hesitated, clearly reluctant, but eventually walked toward Vanessa, her expression guarded. "What?" Mia asked, keeping her voice low. Vanessa leaned in, lowering her own voice. "I need your help." Mia raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Help with what?" Vanessa clenched her jaw, trying to control her frustration. "I need to talk to Olivia before we land." Mia let out a small, dry laugh. "You want me to ask her for a meeting? After everything?" Vanessa exhaled sharply. "I need to fix this," she insisted. "I just need to explain myself." Mia crossed her arms. "Explain what, Vanessa? That you grabbed her? That you tried to kick her out of first class?" Vanessa clenched her fists, struggling to hold back her temper. "I didn't know who she was." Mia's face turned stony. "That's the problem," she said simply. Vanessa's breath hitched. Mia shook her head. "You don't need my help. You need a miracle." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Vanessa alone with the suffocating reality of her situation. She had burned too many bridges, and now there was no one left willing to help her. Vanessa sat motionless in the crew jump seat, staring blankly at the aisle ahead. The truth Mia had just thrown at her stung worse than she wanted to admit. No one was going to help her. She was on her own. Her fingers twitched in her lap as she glanced toward Olivia once again. The woman still hadn't looked her way, still hadn't acknowledged her. She didn't need to. Vanessa already knew she had lost, but she wasn't ready to accept it. There had to be something, anything she could do before the plane landed. Swallowing hard, she forced herself to stand. If Mia wouldn't help her, she would handle this herself. Ignoring the way some passengers turned their head, she walked toward Olivia's seat, her hands clenched at her sides. She stopped just beside her, inhaling sharply before speaking. "Olivia!" For the first time in what felt like forever, Olivia turned her head. Her expression remained unreadable, her face calm, her baby still asleep against her chest. Vanessa suddenly felt smaller than she had expected. She cleared her throat. "I want to apologize," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. Olivia didn't say anything. She just watched her. Vanessa's heart pounded. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I made a mistake. Still, Olivia said nothing. Vanessa shifted her weight. I didn't know who you were, she continued, trying to fill the silence, trying to explain herself in some way. If I had known... Olivia held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Vanessa's mouth clamped shut. Olivia tilted her head slightly. So if I wasn't James Carter's wife, this wouldn't have been a mistake? Vanessa's stomach twisted. That's not what I... Olivia's voice remained quiet, steady. Would you have apologized if I was just another passenger? Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because she knew the answer, and so did Olivia. A long silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Olivia exhaled slowly. I don't need your apology. Vanessa's breath hitched. But... Olivia turned her gaze back toward the window, effectively ending the conversation. Vanessa stood there, frozen, feeling exposed, feeling helpless. Then she heard it, a small murmur from nearby, a quiet chuckle from a passenger, a low whisper from another row. She had humiliated herself all over again. Her face burned as she turned away, forcing herself to walk back toward the crew section, her steps heavy, her throat dry. She had hoped for some kind of mercy, some way to turn things around. But Olivia had already decided, and she had just sealed her fate. Vanessa moved stiffly down the aisle, her footsteps heavy, her face burning with humiliation. The first-class passengers no longer pretended not to watch. Some were openly staring, others exchanged quiet smirks, and a few whispered to one another behind cupped hands. She could hear fragments of their conversations. She thought she was in charge. Now she's the one begging. Did you see how she froze? She knows it's over. Her stomach twisted, but she kept walking, forcing her expression to remain neutral. She had spent years keeping her posture straight, her emotions locked away, controlling every situation. But this was beyond her control. She reached the back of the plane, gripping the nearest seat for balance before sinking into the crew jump seat again. Her breath came unevenly as she tried to process everything. It was over. Olivia hadn't just refused her apology. She had dismissed her entirely, the same way Vanessa had dismissed countless passengers before. No second chances. No way to make things right. Just complete and total rejection. And that wasn't even the worst of it. The plane was still in the air, but when they landed, Vanessa knew things would only get worse. She turned her head slightly, looking toward the galley where Mia stood, pretending to focus on the drink cart. Vanessa could tell she had heard the entire conversation. Mia didn't say anything, but the slight shake of her head told Vanessa everything she needed to know. She had embarrassed herself, again. Vanessa gritted her teeth, gripping the edges of her seat. This wasn't fair. All she had done was enforce the rules. Why did one mistake, one miscalculation, mean losing everything? Her mind raced for solutions, for some way out of this mess. Maybe she could talk to the captain again, ask him to reconsider. Maybe she could claim she had been under stress, that she hadn't meant for things to go this far. Maybe she could reach out to someone at corporate, someone who might listen before it was too late. Her hands moved to grab her phone again, but the moment she unlocked it, a new wave of dread hit her. Her company credentials had been revoked. She tried to open the airline's crew scheduling app. Access denied. She checked her messages. No new notifications, no calls, no support from anyone on the inside. She swallowed hard and scrolled through her contacts. She had worked with so many people over the years, trained new staff, built relationships with higher-ups. But now as she hovered over the names of old colleagues, she hesitated. Would they even pick up? Would they want to be associated with her now that she had been erased? The answer hit her before she even tried calling. No one was going to help her. She let the phone slip from her fingers, her hands clenching into fists on her lap. This was real. She wasn't just losing this flight. She was losing her entire career. A sharp chime rang through the cabin, and the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your trays are in the upright position. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. Vanessa's stomach dropped. This was it. Once the plane touched the ground, she would no longer be a flight attendant, no longer be respected, no longer have anything she had worked for. And worst of all, she knew what was waiting for her when she stepped off this plane. James Carter wasn't done with her yet. The descent felt like the longest in Vanessa's life. The hum of the engines droned in her ears, but all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. She sat frozen in the crew jump seat, fingers curled around the edges as if holding on to the last shred of control she had left. But there was no control anymore. Not for her. Passengers moved around her, buckling seatbelts, adjusting their belongings, preparing for landing as if this were just another flight. For them, it was. They would land, collect their bags, and move on with their lives. But for her, the moment those wheels touched the ground, everything she had built would be over. The seatbelt light flicked on with a sharp ding, and the final announcement came. "Cabin crew, please take your seats for landing." The other flight attendants moved efficiently, checking rows one last time, securing carts and taking their own seats. No one looked at her, not Mia, not the others. She had been part of this team just hours ago, a senior attendant, a leader. Now she was a ghost sitting in the back, waiting for her sentence to be carried out. She swallowed the lump in her throat and turned her gaze toward first class. Olivia still hadn't acknowledged her again. She sat peacefully in her seat, stroking her baby's back, looking out the window as if nothing had ever happened. The baby, as if mocking Vanessa's earlier complaints, slept soundly against his mother's chest. Vanessa's nails dug into her palms. How had she lost so quickly? How had one mistake unraveled everything? But it wasn't just one mistake, was it? That was the thought she had been trying to suppress. This wasn't a single moment of bad judgment. This was the result of years of believing she was untouchable, of thinking that rules only applied to passengers, not to her. She had built her reputation on control, on enforcing authority, on making sure everyone knew she was in charge. And now, for the first time, she was the one being controlled. The plane jolted slightly as the landing gear deployed. The passengers around her didn't seem to notice, but to Vanessa it felt like a warning, a reminder that the ground was coming, fast. The final seconds stretched into eternity, and then impact. A sharp thud. The wheels hit the runway and the aircraft rumbled forward. The landing was smooth, steady, nothing out of the ordinary. The passengers barely reacted, already reaching for their phones, checking messages, stretching after the long flight. But for Vanessa, that sound was the end of everything. Her breath came short and shallow as she clenched the seat beneath her. She had officially lost. The plane slowed, taxiing toward the gate, and Vanessa forced herself to look forward. The gate was visible through the small window near the galley, and her stomach twisted violently at what she saw. They were waiting for her. Two uniformed security officers stood just beyond the jet bridge, along with a group of airline executives. They weren't waiting for the passengers. They weren't waiting for the flight crew. They were waiting for her. She sucked in a sharp breath, panic clawing up her throat. No. This wasn't just a disciplinary meeting. This wasn't just a quiet termination. This was going to be public. She had never in her entire career seen a crew member get escorted off a plane in front of passengers. It was humiliating, degrading. But that was exactly why James Carter had set it up this way. He wasn't just firing her, he was making an example out of her. She tried to swallow, but her throat was too dry. The aircraft finally came to a full stop at the gate. Another chime rang through the cabin. The seatbelt light switched off. Passengers unbuckled, standing, reaching for the overhead bins, stretching and chatting casually as if they hadn't just witnessed the fall of someone's entire career. Vanessa didn't move. She couldn't. Her body felt like dead weight. She watched as Olivia calmly gathered her belongings, standing up and adjusting the baby against her shoulder. She still hadn't looked Vanessa's way, and maybe that was the worst part. She didn't have to. Olivia had already won. The cockpit door opened and the captain stepped out. His eyes met Vanessa's for a brief second, and though his face remained unreadable, there was something final in his gaze. No sympathy, no anger, just finality. Mia walked past her, pausing for just a moment. She hesitated, her lips parting slightly as if she might say something. But then, she simply gave a small shake of her head and moved on. Vanessa wanted to scream, to demand someone speak for her, to fight, but it was too late. she had already been erased. A new voice filled the cabin, breaking the silence. "Miss Holt, please gather your belongings and exit the aircraft immediately." It was one of the airline executives, standing just inside the jet bridge now, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Some passengers turned, their curiosity piqued. Others who had already heard the rumors watched with interest. A few even pulled out their phones, pretending to check notifications. But Vanessa knew better. They were recording. Humiliation flooded through her, her breath coming short and fast. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. But then Olivia finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. Not gloating, not angry. Just done. "I hope you remember this." Vanessa's entire body locked up. She turned her head slowly, and for the first time since their confrontation, Olivia was looking straight at her. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out, because there was nothing left to say. Security stepped forward, and Vanessa Holt, once one of the most feared flight attendants on this airline, took her final walk down the aisle. No longer the one in charge. Vanessa's feet felt like lead as she stepped forward. The aisle, which had always been hers to command, now stretched out before her like a gauntlet. The soft hum of the overhead lights, the hushed murmurs of passengers, the quiet clicking of phones recording. She heard it all, felt it pressing down on her. Every step felt heavier than the last. She forced her back straight, tried to keep her chin up, but she couldn't stop the burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. Security didn't touch her, didn't grab her by the arm, but their presence alone was enough. She knew the message they were sending. "You don't belong here anymore." She passed row after row, feeling the weight of every stare. In the first-class section, some passengers watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Others, the ones who had witnessed everything from the beginning, exchanged glances. A few whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "She looks like she's going to be sick. Did you see the way she froze? She wasn't expecting this. I guess you don't slap the CEO's wife and get away with it." Vanessa clenched her jaw so tightly it hurt. She wanted to snap at them, tell them to shut up, tell them they didn't understand what had happened. But what was the point? Even she knew the truth now. She had done this to herself. Her mind flashed back to every moment she had dismissed passengers, every time she had used her authority to push someone down instead of lifting them up. She had spent years enforcing rules, making sure she was the one who decided who deserved what. And now the same silence she had once used to control others was being used against her. Her eyes flickered toward Olivia as she passed her seat. The mother was adjusting the strap on her bag, shifting the baby's weight on her shoulder. She wasn't watching Vanessa walk by. She wasn't smirking or looking pleased. She simply wasn't interested. Vanessa didn't know why, but that hurt the most. She had been expecting anger, maybe even a victorious expression, something that showed Olivia had been waiting for this moment. But instead, Olivia was already moving on, already focused on something else. Vanessa wasn't important enough to hold her attention anymore. She reached the front of the plane, where the two uniformed security officers and a group of airline executives were waiting. One of the executives, a woman in a navy blue suit with a company badge clipped to her blazer, stepped forward. "Miss Holt, you'll be escorted to the administrative office immediately," she said, her voice cool and professional, as if she were speaking to a stranger. Vanessa barely recognized her, but she knew exactly what that meant. She was no longer a colleague, no longer part of the airline. She was just another problem that needed to be handled. She opened her mouth, still desperate to argue, to fix this somehow. The executive didn't wait for her to finish. She simply turned and started walking down the jet bridge, expecting Vanessa to follow. The security officers flanked her, their presence silent but firm. She had no choice. As she stepped off the plane, the whispers behind her didn't stop. She could still feel the weight of those stares, the knowledge that her name was already spreading through the airline, through the industry, through social media. She had spent years making sure everyone knew her authority. Now they were all watching as it was ripped away from her. The walk down the jet bridge was the longest of her life. Her thoughts spun as she moved forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. What would she do now? Where would she go? She had spent so long in the airline industry, built her life around this job. Without it, Who was she? The doors at the end of the jet bridge slid open, revealing the brightly lit terminal. And there, standing just beyond security, was James Carter. Her stomach plummeted. He wasn't wearing a suit like the executives around him. His sleeves were rolled up, his posture casual, but there was nothing relaxed about the way he looked at her. His expression was unreadable, calm, calculated, but his eyes held the kind of power that made her want to disappear. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a termination. This was something bigger. James Carter wasn't here just to fire her. He was here to finish what had already started. Vanessa's breath hitched as she locked eyes with James Carter. He wasn't flanked by bodyguards or standing behind a wall of executives. He didn't need to be. His presence alone was enough to make the air in the terminal feel heavier. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his stance relaxed, but there was a quiet force in the way he carried himself. He was a man who never needed to raise his voice to command a room, and now he was looking right at her. Vanessa felt her pulse throb against her temples. She had seen powerful men before. Businessmen who flew first class weekly, corporate executives who thought their money made them untouchable. But James Carter wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with physical threats. This was a man who could erase her career with a single word, and he already had. The security officer stopped just short of him, giving her space to step forward. But she hesitated, feeling every nerve in her body scream for her to turn around, to run, to do something other than stand there like a fool. James' expression didn't change. "You have something to say?" His voice was steady, calm, almost too calm. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she say? That she was sorry? That she didn't know who Olivia was? That she hadn't meant to overstep? All of it sounded weak, even in her own head. Still, she had to try. I made a mistake, she forced out. James gave the smallest tilt of his head, his gaze unreadable. "A mistake," he repeated as if testing the word. Vanessa swallowed hard. "I didn't know she was—" His eyes sharpened. She cut herself off instantly, because that wasn't the right thing to say, and she knew it. It wasn't about who Olivia was. That was the part she hadn't understood at first. That was why Mia, the passengers, the captain, everyone had turned against her so quickly. She had treated Olivia like she didn't belong. She had assumed, judged, dismissed, and that was the real mistake. James watched her silently, giving her time to either continue or dig her grave deeper. Vanessa forced herself to breathe. "I shouldn't have treated her the way I did," she corrected, her voice quieter now. "It was wrong." James exhaled slowly, shifting his weight slightly. "You shouldn't have." His agreement sent another wave of panic through her, because there was no but, no hint of leniency in his tone, no opening for her to fix this. I was just trying to do my job," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. James finally took a step forward, not aggressive, not threatening, but enough to make her feel small. "Your job?" he repeated. She knew she was walking into dangerous territory, but she couldn't stop herself. First class is supposed to be a quiet experience. People pay for that. I thought... James held up a hand, and she immediately fell silent. His voice remained steady, but it carried the weight of a final decision. "First class isn't about quiet," he said. "It's about respect." Vanessa swallowed. He let the silence stretch before continuing. "My wife paid for that seat," he said, "just like everyone else. She didn't ask for special treatment. She didn't demand anything. She just wanted to sit there, like any other passenger." Vanessa clenched her hands into fists, but she didn't dare respond. James's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "And you decided," he continued, "before even checking, before even thinking, that she didn't belong there." She dropped her gaze to the floor. Because he was right, she had decided. She hadn't looked at Olivia and seen a first-class passenger. She had seen an inconvenience, a problem to be dealt with, and she had acted on it without hesitation. James let the silence hang between them. Then finally he sighed and shook his head. "I don't care if you were having a bad day," he said. "I don't care if you thought you were protecting other passengers. I don't care what excuse you try to come up with. Vanessa's nails dug into her palms. You had a choice, he said, and you made the wrong one. His words felt heavier than anything else she had heard today, because they weren't just words, they were a sentence. He turned to the executive standing nearby, speaking as if she wasn't even there anymore. She's done. Vanessa's breath caught. It wasn't just this job. It wasn't just this airline. It was everything. The executive in the navy blue suit nodded. Understood, sir. James turned back to her one last time. There's a car waiting outside, he said. You'll be escorted to collect your belongings from the crew office. After that, you're gone. Vanessa's mouth went dry. Just like that. Everything she had worked for. Every connection. Every bit of seniority. Every ounce of respect. Gone. James gave her a long, final look. Enjoy your last time in an airport, he said. Then he walked away. Vanessa stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. She wasn't just being fired. She was being erased. Her name would be blacklisted across the entire industry. No airline would touch her. No company would take the risk. It was over. One of the security officers shifted beside her. Miss Holt, he said quietly. She swallowed, her throat burning. She could fight. She could argue. She could try to beg, but it wouldn't matter. James Carter had already spoken, and his word was final. With slow, unsteady movements, Vanessa turned and followed the security officers through the terminal, her steps heavy, her heart pounding in her chest. Every passing minute, every second that ticked by, took her further away from the life she had known. And for the first time, she truly understood. The power she thought she had was never hers to begin with. Vanessa walked through the terminal in a daze, her steps mechanical, her body moving only because she had no other choice. The security officers flanked her, their presence a silent warning. There would be no second chances, no last-minute reprieve. Passengers bustled around her, some rushing to their gates, others dragging suitcases toward baggage claim. It was a normal day for them, but for Vanessa, it was the last time she would ever set foot in an airport as an airline employee. She had spent years walking these terminals with authority, her uniform crisp, her badge shining, her presence commanding. Now she was just another person being escorted out. The whispers followed her. Some people recognized her from the flight, their eyes lingering a second too long before they turned away, pretending not to watch. Others had already heard the news. Whispers traveled fast, especially when they involved a public downfall. She could hear the hushed voices behind her. That's her. She got fired right in the middle of the flight. She must have really messed up. Vanessa's fingers twitched, her nails digging into the palm of her hand. She wanted to scream, to snap at them, to tell them they didn't understand. But what would be the point? The doors ahead slid open with a soft hiss, and the rush of outside air hit her like a slap. She stepped out into the arrivals area, blinking against the harsh afternoon light. Then she saw the black car waiting at the curb, a sleek, unmarked sedan, engine running, tinted windows, waiting for her. One of the security officers gestured toward it. Your ride is here, Miss Holt. Vanessa's pulse spiked. This wasn't a company shuttle. This wasn't just an escort to pick up her things. This was James Carter making sure she left his airline personally. Her mouth felt dry as she approached the vehicle. The driver, a man in a dark suit, stepped out and opened the door for her without a word. Vanessa hesitated for just a second, the weight of finality pressing down on her. Once she got in that car, there was no coming back. But what other choice did she have? She swallowed hard and slid inside. The door shut behind her with a soft click, sealing her inside the cool, dimly lit space. The leather seats smelled expensive, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning filled the silence. The driver got in, shifting the car into gear. Crew office first, he said, his voice flat. It wasn't a question. Vanessa's throat tightened. And after that, the driver didn't look at her. I'd take you to the airport exit. Her stomach twisted. She knew what that meant. Not just fired, not just removed. Banned. Her hands curled into fists on her lap. She had heard of this happening before. Crew members who broke serious policies. Employees who committed acts so severe they weren't just fired, they were flagged. Their names sent to every major airline. their records marked in a way that ensured they would never work in the industry again. She had never thought it would happen to her. The car moved smoothly down the road, the airport shrinking behind her. She stared out the window, watching as the terminal passed by. The same terminal she had walked through thousands of times, greeting passengers, checking rosters, giving orders. Now she was leaving it behind for good. A part of her wanted to believe there was still a way out. Maybe if she spoke to the right people, if she reached out to someone high enough, she could explain herself. She could twist the story, convince them that she hadn't meant for things to get this bad. But then she remembered the way James Carter had looked at her, the finality in his voice. She had crossed a line, and there was no coming back. The drive to the crew office felt like an eternity, but eventually the car slowed to a stop. The driver didn't say anything. He simply opened his door, walked around the vehicle, and pulled hers open. Vanessa hesitated. She wasn't ready. She didn't want to walk inside and face what was waiting for her. But she didn't have a choice. With a slow, measured breath, she stepped out. The crew office entrance was smaller than the main terminal, tucked away for employees only. It had always been a place of familiarity for her, a place where she had reported for duty, reviewed flight schedules, laughed with coworkers in the break room. Now it felt like enemy territory. She pushed through the doors, and the first thing she saw was Ethan Vaughn, the supervisor. He stood near the reception desk, a folder in his hands, his expression unreadable. Vanessa stiffened. She had barely spoken to him before. He was new, still finding his place in management. Someone she would have dismissed as unimportant just a few weeks ago. Now he was the one handling her termination. "Miss Holt," he said, glancing at the security officers behind her before looking back at the folder. "Let's get this over with." Her throat tightened. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Ethan didn't react. "James Carter's orders." That was all he needed to say. Vanessa's hands trembled as he opened the folder and slid a set of papers onto the desk in front of her. "Sign these," he instructed. She hesitated, glancing at the bold letters at the top of the page. Termination of employment, effective immediately. Her stomach twisted violently. She had been the one writing up reports, disciplining employees, enforcing rules. She had never been on this side of the process. She forced herself to breathe and grabbed the pen. Her signature looked shaky as she scrawled it across the paper. Ethan flipped the page. "You'll also need to acknowledge this." She scanned the next document, and her vision blurred slightly. Permanent employment flag, no rehire status. Her hand clenched around the pen. This means I can't. "You won't work in the airline industry again," Ethan confirmed. "Not under any airline associated with our network." Vanessa's breath came short and fast. "No." The words slipped out before she could stop it. She had expected to be fired. She had prepared herself for that much. But this was something else. This was complete exile. Her hands shook as she signed the paper. Ethan didn't look at her as he collected the documents, sliding them back into the folder. "You'll need to turn in your uniform and badge." Vanessa's stomach dropped. This was it. Her fingers fumbled as she reached for the pin on her chest, her name badge that had once represented years of experience, authority, respect. Now, it was worthless. She unpinned it slowly, setting it on the desk. Then, with even more hesitation, she slipped off her uniform jacket. The fabric felt heavier than it ever had before. She folded it neatly and placed it beside the badge. Ethan nodded toward the security officers. "She's done here." Vanessa flinched at the finality of his words. Just like that, she was done. One of the officers gestured toward the door. "Miss Holt, let's go." Her body moved on autopilot as she stepped back into the car. This time, when the door shut, she knew there was no coming back. The car pulled away from the crew office, driving toward the airport exit. And as she stared out the window, watching the world she had once ruled slip away, one terrifying thought hit her harder than anything else. For the first time in her life, she had nowhere to go. The car moved smoothly down the road, putting more distance between Vanessa and the only life she had ever known. The towering glass windows of the airport terminal reflected the late afternoon sun, and for a moment she could see herself in the window, her reflection distorted, stretched, unfamiliar. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She had stepped into that airport earlier that day as Vanessa Holt, senior flight attendant, the one who set the rules, enforced them, commanded authority. Now, she was no one. The weight of that realization settled in her chest like a lead brick. She sat stiffly in the back seat, staring out the window, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. The security officers were gone now. There was no need for them anymore. The driver was silent, his face blank. Just another employee carrying out orders. James Carter had orchestrated this entire thing so smoothly, so efficiently. Vanessa had been erased, and she hadn't even gotten the chance to fight back. Her mind replayed everything. The moment Olivia stepped onto the plane, the way she had dismissed her, assuming she didn't belong, the slap, the text, the way the captain had called her to the cockpit, the sound of James Carter's voice over the radio, and worst of all, Olivia's final words to her. "I hope you remember this." Vanessa swallowed hard. She would remember every single second, every humiliating moment. She had always believed that power belonged to those who took it. That authority was something you held over others, something you maintained by showing strength, by never backing down. But Olivia had done the exact opposite. She hadn't fought. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't demanded anything. She had waited. And in the end, she had let someone else do the damage for her. James Carter had removed Vanessa from the airline as if she were a smudge on his perfectly polished company. And the worst part? She had spent years thinking she was untouchable. She had treated passengers like nuisances, crew members like subordinates, rules like tools to bend at her convenience, and now she was the inconvenience. Her fingers dug into her palms as the car pulled up to the airport's outer perimeter, nearing the main road. Vanessa's mouth went dry. The final checkpoint. This was it. Once she passed this point, she would no longer be an airline employee. She wouldn't be a flight attendant. She wouldn't be anything. Her chest tightened as the security gate rose, allowing the car through. She turned her head, looking back one last time. The airport tower stood tall against the sky, flights taking off in the distance. The sound of engines roaring as planes carried passengers to destinations she would never reach again. The realization hit her all at once, suffocating. This wasn't just a job. This had been her entire life. And now it was gone. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had no plan, no backup job waiting for her, no network of people who would support her. She had spent so much time climbing, rising, pushing others aside in her pursuit of control, that she had never stopped to think about what would happen if she fell. And now she had. Hard. Her phone vibrated in her bag, snapping her out of her thoughts. She hesitated before pulling it out, half expecting it to be a message from someone at the airline. But when she looked at the screen, her stomach dropped. It wasn't a message. It was an email notification. Account login failed. Your access has been revoked. Her hands tightened around the phone as she scrolled. More emails flooded in. Crew schedule. No longer assigned to any flight's final payroll confirmation. Your last payment will be processed within 14 days. ID badge access disabled. You no longer have entry privileges. Her throat clenched. It was real. She had known it was real before, but seeing it, watching the system delete her in real time, was something else entirely. Vanessa's breath came short and quick. The car slowed to a stop at a busy intersection. The driver didn't say anything, just waited for the light to change. Vanessa stared at her phone, at the cold final words on the screen, and then another email arrived. This one was different. It wasn't from the airline. It was from a job recruitment agency. Vanessa's brows furrowed as she opened it, scanning the brief message. We regret to inform you that due to your recent termination in industry flag status, we are unable to proceed with any future employment opportunities at this time. Her entire body locked up. It had already spread. She had only just been fired minutes ago, and already doors were closing. Her name was circulating. Her reputation was ruined. Panic bubbled up inside her, sharp and suffocating. She opened a new search tab, typing in her own name. The results loaded, and her stomach clenched. Someone had already posted about her on an airline forum. A blurry photo from the flight, her walking down the aisle with security behind her, was attached to the post. The caption made her want to scream. Vanessa Holt, first-class flight attendant, loses everything after slapping passenger. Karma. Her breathing turned shallow. It was out there now. Not just within the company, not just in the industry. The world was going to see this. The car lurched forward again, the light turning green. Vanessa barely noticed. She sat frozen, her phone clutched in her hands, staring at the screen as her entire future crumbled before her eyes. For years, she had made passengers feel small, made them feel insignificant, and now for the first time in her life, she knew exactly what that felt like, and there was no one left to save her. What do you think? Did she get what she deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. And if you know someone who would love this story, make sure to share it with them too.